San Gimignano is an extraordinary example of medieval city planning, with the famous towers and elegant piazzas that attest to its illustrious past. The Civic Museum complex comprises the Palazzo Comunale, Municipal Palace, and the Torre Grossa, literally the Great Tower, which, for their exceptionality in Europe's historic and artistic patrimony, are the crux of this designated UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Palazzo Comunale, also known as the Palazzo del Popolo, People's Palace, or Palazzo Nuovo del Podesta, New Palace of the Podesta, can be found in Piazza del Duomo, beside the church, and dates back to 1288, when Florence's Sinbaldo de' Pulci was the chief magistrate. The term podesta derives from the Latin potestas, which means power, authority, sovereignty. During the time of medieval communes, the podesta was the highest civil office. The podesta, who held the position for 6 months, were foreigners so as to remain unbiased and uncorrupted by family and acquaintances. Their position gave them executive and judiciary powers and control of the police, while command of the militias was given to the captain of the people. The lower part of the palace was built in stone, while the upper part is in brick. The front staircase of the palace leads to a sort of balcony that substitutes a medieval arengo from which the podesta presented himself to the citizens below. The internal courtyard is part of the first enlargement of the palace in 1323. It was executed in brick and decorated with the coats of arms of past podesta, some frescoed, others sculpted in relief. In the back is a well from 1361, as indicated by the date carved on its front. On the right is the Loggia del Giudice, Loggia of the Judge, decorated with frescoes. Up the stairs that lead to the civic offices, we find a fresco that was detached for conservation reasons and later placed back in its original location. The painting depicts Madonna and Child with saints, attributed to Lippo di Vanni and dating to around 1370. On the wall before the stairs is a monochrome fresco by Giovanni Antonio Bazzi, known as Sodoma, depicting Saint Ivo administering justice, depicting Saint Ivo administrating justice, dated 1507. The painting comes from the artist's early years working in Siena. The episode is painted in 2 scenes. On the right, some wealthy people are shown with cups filled to the brim with golden coins, attempting to corrupt Saint Ivo, the patron saint of jurists. On the left, in a vaster space, the saint administers justice in favor of the poor, without being corrupted. Inside the Palazzo Comunale are important pictorial cycles, such as the one in the Sala di Dante with a knightly theme. The room is named Sala di Dante because it was where the poet Dante Alighieri, as Florence's ambassador, pleaded San Gimignano's governing body to join the Guelph League in Tuscany. On the wall in front of the entrance, Charles II of Naples, known as the Lame, is depicted enthroned and surrounded by people paying tribute to him with the gift of a falcon. The cycle, which originally covered all the walls in the room, is divided into 2 bands. In the upper band, we see tournaments with knights who raise their insignias, while in the lower register there are hunting scenes. The paintings are attributed to the Florentine painter Azzo di Maceto, who was influenced by Cimabue's style. It is perhaps a portrayal of festivities held in Florence in 1289, on the occasion of Charles II's passage through Tuscany on his way to Rieti for his coronation as the King of Naples. On the right wall is Lippo Memmi's Maestra, executed in 1317. Lippo is a painter of the Sienese school, active in the first half of the 14th century, and a follower of Simone Martini, with whom he also has a familial connection, as Martini married Lippo's sister Giovanna in 1324. The painting is inspired by the Maestra painted by Martini in the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena 2 years before, in 1315. Around the Virgin, there are several angels and saints, among which are the 2 patron saints of the city, Gimignano and Nicola, who support the central canopy posts. Praying kneeled on Mary's right is Messer Nello di Mino di Tolomei, patron of the work and distinguished representative of the Sienese banking family. He wears an elegant striped dress lined with fur. Between 1366 and 1367, the Sienese painter Bartolo di Fredi added 4 figures to the group of saints: Saint Anthony the Abbot and Saint Fina on the left, and Blessed Bartolomeo Buonpedoni and Saint Louis on the right. In 1461, the Florentine painter Benozzo Gazzoli made some restorations to the fresco after 2 doors were built into the wall, ruining some of the scene. Climbing the Torre Grossa, the highest tower in the city, visitors are greeted by not only a beautiful panorama, but an exceptional series of 14th century frescoes of a romantic nature. On the 2nd floor of the tower, there are the Podesta apartments, most likely decorated in 1306, around the time of Merullo d'Andrea di Assisi's tenure. The frescoes are credited to Memo di Filippuccio, the father of Lippo, the artist behind the Maestra in the Sala di Dante. In San Gimignano, Memo di Filippuccio became the civic painter and created not only major works, but he also decorated books, flags, and heraldic banners for the Podesta. The frescoes are exempia, moral examples, addressed to the Podesta, saying that he should not give in to corruption and to worldly temptations, here personified by a seductress. In the middle band, to the left, Phyllis riding Aristotle can be seen, an episode that portrays the great philosopher as a victim of love. Aristotle scolded his pupil Alexander the Great for giving in to the passion of love and succumbing to the courtesan Phyllis. Alexander returned to his military duties, but the woman got revenge on Aristotle, successfully subjugating him to the point of making the philosopher get on his hands and knees to be ridden by her and driven by a whip. To the right is a young man reading a book, while a girl approaches him. Some have recognized this episode as the kiss between Paolo and Francesca, made famous by Dante Alighieri in the 5th canto of Inferno. The two fell in love while reading the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. Galahaut was the book, and he who wrote it. That day, no farther did we read therein. On the east wall, where the entrance door is, the most unique story in the room's decoration unfolds, with a scene of 2 youths taking a bath in a large tub, and right after, they lay down in the large bed while a maid, pulling back the curtains, shows the scene to the viewer. Exiting from the Podesta apartments and returning to the landing, we enter into a large room that corresponds to the top floor of the palazzo. Here, the civic Pinacoteca begins, containing extraordinary works of art from the medieval and Renaissance periods, all coming from churches and religious institutions in the area. In the first and largest room, on either side of the entrance, are 2 imposing crosses from the 13th century. The crucifix, by Coppo di Marcovaldo, the most important Florentine master prior to Cimabue, comes from the monastery of Saint Chiara and was painted around 1255 to 1260. The other crucifix, the work of Rinaldo del Siena, dates from 1270 and 1280 and comes from the church of the monastery of Saint Girolamo. In the same room, in the back, there are 2 publicly commissioned tondos painted by Filippino Lippi between 1482 and 1483 for the audience chamber in the Palazzo Comunale. Depicted are the Annunciating Angel and the Virgin Mary, both testimonies to the new influence of Flemish painting on the Florentine artist's style, such as the attention paid to the environmentalists and the floral details. In the center of the wall, in between the two tondos, is an altarpiece by Bernardino di Beto, known as Pintoricchio, who painted the Virgin Mary with the saints Gregory the Great and Benedict. Coming from the church of Olivetan Monastery of Santa Maria Assunta in Barbiano, the work is one of the artist's final pieces from his sojourn in Siena. The shutters from the tabernacle containing the reliquary bust of Saint Fina, the most beloved saint in San Gimignano, are on display in the next room. The work was commissioned to Florentine painter Lorenzo di Nicolo for the cathedral in 1402, who depicted Saint Fina with a model of the city and a bundle of violets in her hands. Saint Gregory the Great, who announced to the young girl her impending death, stories from the life of the saint and her miracles post-mortem. The Civic Museum complex also includes a visit to the Archaeology Museum at the Monastery of Saint Chiara, which documents the origins of the city. Saint Fina's Speziaria apothecary, with precious apothecary vases that still preserve the ingredients used in the preparation of medicines, and the Raffaele di Grada Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art, named after the famous Milanese painter that chose San Gimignano as his home. The Archaeology Museum is on the first floor of the complex and exhibits artifacts from the Etruscan, Roman, and medieval areas coming from the local territory. The display is divided in two sections. One is dedicated to Etruscan and Roman art, with objects coming from settlements discovered in the area, dating from the 7th to 1st centuries BC, while the other is reserved for medieval art with objects in glass and ceramics. Also on this floor of the museum is an important collection of apothecary vases made between the 15th and 18th centuries, in addition to glass containers dated to the 1500s and 1600s, which make up part of the apothecary of the hospital founded in 1253. Today's display recalls the layout of the antique pharmacy, with its spaces divided between the workshop, where sales were made, and the laboratory dedicated to the preparation of medicinal substances. The Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art conserves a number of canvases by the artist. The permanent collection comprises works by other 20th century artists, including Niccolò Canici, Renato Guttuso, Sergio Vacchi, Ugo Nespolo, Marco Gastini, and Carmelo Zotti.